So I've been gone for the past, like, I don't know, 2 months, but I have been playing tournaments probably every weekend since my baby was born. And so this tournament right here is a tournament that was played the Saturday before Mother's Day. So some background, I had a family dinner to go to at like 5 o'clock, and this was a classical 45-minute with 10-second increment game. So going into that, I realized if I'm not doing very well, I'm just gonna skip the last round, but I'm gonna at least play 3 rounds in this tournament. So in my first round, I go up against a 982 rated player. I am in the under 1700 rated section in this tournament. And so I am here, I'm black. So he goes E4, I go C6, he goes D5. We're in our typical Carl Icahn structure. Nothing's really new here. And he wants to go into the classical variation. So I say, great. I'll take this, you take with the knight. But he doesn't take with the knight, he puts his bishop here, which, weird to begin with. And so I just defend the pawn and make it hard for him to really do anything about it. And he develops his bishop out. And at this point, it's just like, hey, I'll just keep developing if you're gonna let me. And I'm gonna stop this bishop move. And I think, I noticed here, with A3, it's like, why are you even playing that? It's not even a move that's really gonna help you out. You played A3, so I brought my bishop out here to D6. Just developing my bishop looking to castle. He plays H3, which has a much better like move because you can stop the knight on G4. And then I double up this so that I can take the bishop. So he's gonna have to defend that. And instead he gets his knight out. So I just take the knight, he takes with the queen, and I attack that queen there. So the queen has really nowhere to go, it has to come back. But it says he gets greedy going for this G7 pawn. And I back up, say, bishop, I'm still gonna guard this. You're not gonna really be able to do much because if the knight takes there, take back, and I'm still hitting the queen. So the bishop drops back and I go and I threaten the queen here. Now at this point, I'm doing pretty good. He goes to attack my queen, but I just get it out. Now I'm gonna threaten to take this B2 pawn. He castles, and then I move this out. One, it's guarded here, but I'm also threatening this bishop. So where is this queen gonna go? He's gonna come over here to E5. I take the bishop, queen takes back, and I push to H6. Just looking to prevent any more shenanigans. What I'm looking for here, especially, is to get my bishop here on G5 and pin this queen to the king. He realizes that though, attacks my queen. And from here, it's just like, okay, cool. There's nowhere that this knight can really go. It can go back, that's fine, but you've lost your queen, so this knight is definitely gone. He has to move the queen, and I pick up the free knight. So this is really, really swimming. I have an 8-point lead at this advantage. We are in the wrong screen. So I take the knight. I'm up a piece and a pawn right here. He goes, attacks my queen. I'll just drop back, not a big deal. He attacks my pawn. That pawn was a freebie anyway, so I'll trade off the pawn that I've already traded, and I'm gonna now skewer the queen and the rook here. Now obviously he has G4 to stop this, so I bring the bishop back and he develops his rook. At this point, I think it's probably safe to castle. He brings the queen out. I don't know exactly what his plan is here. Take with check. So I bring the rook here. He still doesn't do that though. And so I say, cool, I'm gonna do this top engine move that I find out later on, where the bishop's gonna take the A3 pawn, he takes back, I put the king in check, and then I take the bishop and sack, well, I don't sack the queen because there is a nice pin here. So I win the bishop after sacking mine, so I pick up a pawn there. King drops back, I then take the pawn. Queen can't take the bishop because the queen takes back, so he brings out this, I put the king in check, king comes back here, and I take the rook. Now he goes to attack here, and I say, great, because what you can do is you can take with check, and you take the queen, and then he just gives me all his pieces and resigns. So the first game is a game I definitely should have won, so I picked up the win there, and I'm pretty happy about it. So the second game here is an interesting game because I'm going up against this kid that we normally play against. His name's Aiden, and he is actually like a 2100 in blitz on chess.com. So it's not like he's actually the 1300 that he says he is in this tournament. He's a much stronger player, and I knew that going into it. And I expected fully to lose in this round. So here I start off as white. I go E4, and I go into the King's Indian tax setup. He gets his 2 knights out. And this is when I run into problems. Here I should have just taken on D5. I would have brought equality, and instead I just developed my second knight, and he just brings in more pieces on the attack. I attack the bishop. I just develop my, try to get that system set up as much as possible. And C3 here is a decent move, but I probably should have castled instead. The reason being, after taking, he brings the queen down here, preventing my castling from happening. Now that's really annoying. What I should have done here is brought the queen out here to E2 and traded off the queens. Instead, I brought the bishop out here and I traded off all these pieces and dropped a pawn. So I'm already down a pawn at this point. And after moving back here, I actually am now down 6 points. So he goes there, I bring the rook, he brings the knight back, and he brings the pawn there. I have to bring the knight back. We trade off the knights. And from here, I just trade off. I know that if I simplify the game and make it less complex, I have a better shot at winning him because I know he's a higher rated player than me. So even though I'm down 2 points, I'm trying to simplify as much as possible. And this is where the game changes for me. I bring the bishop over here to h3, and I'm pinning this pawn to this king. And it's very important that I'm doing that because after he pushes g3, I take the pawn here, and he drops a free pawn for me. So great. And then takes that pawn there, or he brings the knight here. Don't really understand what he's mostly trying to do. And so I bring it up to e6, knowing that, you know, I can take this pawn and try to break this pawn structure as much as possible. And he blunders by going over here to g8. Now, the reason this is a blunder is I didn't realize this at the time. I thought there was like, he's defended the pawn. I didn't think it was anything of it, but his eyes lit up like a poker face. Like he was just like, oh no, I made a mistake. And then I was like, okay, there's a tactic here that I need to look at. Spent a minute and I found it by going rook takes g6 here. You can't take back because the bishop takes back with check and you lose your rook there. So he brings the knight over here to f2. I just take with the bishop, taking the pawn anyways, and trading the rooks. Now we're in a rook endgame. I attack the knight. Knight comes back. I simplify that. I'm now in a rook and pawn endgame, up 1 pawn. And I get this in. You push up, you win the game. I ended up winning this game, but I don't have the notation for it. So I was pretty ecstatic about that one. I got lucky off of blunder there. And I'm 2-0 in the tournament. If I win this next game, I'm staying. I'm not going to my family dinner. Sorry, Mom. Not celebrating Mother's Day with you if I win this next game. So I go into third round on the top board, on the #1 board, and I'm playing Vias Vishal. And so if you guys have followed my other recaps in the past, I played his sister Veda, who's about 10 to 12 years old. Crushes me every time, and this is her better brother. So we're playing this. I am black here. So he goes e4, I go into the Caro-Kann setup, and he goes into the fantasy variation. So what I do here is I take here on e4, he takes back, and I push up here to e5. He brings the knight out, and I bring my bishop out to g4. Typical stuff I've done in the fantasy variation when playing all you guys when you do play against it. And he brings out the bishop to e3 here, which I didn't really understand at the time. I don't really see that when I play the fantasy variation. So I take the knight. The reason I took the knight is because I know that when this bishop comes here, when this knight's here and the bishop takes and the knight takes, I'm in trouble. So I preemptively took the knight, and I really should have just waited an extra turn because there was no reason for me to really take that and disrupt my structure. So he takes back here on f3. I push here and we trade off queens. Now he's obviously has like the advantage here with the development. I have literally 1 pawn out and nothing else out. So what I'm thinking here is develop my knight, get my bishop out, get my other knight out, and I develop knight from b to d7. Great, he goes here. And in my calculations, I probably thought for a solid 3 to 5 minutes here. And for some reason, when I was making my calculations, I thought I put the knight over here on f6, and I didn't. Instead, I went over here, bishop to b4, and I lose my rook. And so from this point on, when you have the queens off the board and you're down a rook and a pawn, it's gonna be hard to come back. And so I'm just trading off everything. I'm flustered. And he just manhandles me around the board, takes my pieces, and he's got the pigs on the 7th. I'm gonna lose it. So since I lost the 3rd round, I ended up not playing a 4th round. I ended up spending Mother's Day dinner with my family. But unfortunately, I had a really good shot of winning this tournament and just floundered the opportunity. So I was pretty bummed about that, but I felt very good about my play because I played very good against people that are much better than me. Other than the one blunder, I had a really good, I thought, tournament. So if you like that video, please like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I try to come out with tournament recaps, opening videos, all chess content that helps you grow as a chess player. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.